3 years ago, Natalie told me she was pregnant and I proposed the same night. We had been together 4 years at that point. I was 26, working as a project coordinator, saving for a house. She worked reception at a dental office. We had problems like any couple, but nothing that made me think she was capable of what she did. The pregnancy was rough on her, and around month 6, she started pulling away. Said she needed space, needed to stay with her mom Janice for a while. I thought it was hormones or stress. I kept paying for everything. The prenatal vitamins, the appointments, the baby stuff we had already bought. I drove 40 minutes to her mom's place every weekend to see her. Janice was always cold to me, always had been. She thought Natalie could do better. Natalie's dad, Abraham, barely acknowledged me when I came over. Just sat in his recliner watching sports while I tried to have conversations with a woman who was clearly avoiding me. Then she stopped responding to my texts. Then my calls went straight to voicemail. I showed up at Janice's house one Thursday evening after work, and Abraham answered the door and told me Natalie didn't want to see me anymore. Just like that. No explanation. I asked if the baby was okay, and he said that wasn't my concern anymore. I stood on that porch for probably 5 minutes just processing what he said. I called Natalie's phone right there, and Abraham watched me hear it ring inside the house before someone silenced it. Yo. Abraham standing there watching this man call his daughter's phone, hearing it ring inside, watching someone silence it. That is genuinely one of the most psychologically violent things I've ever heard. No punches thrown, no yelling. Just a man being shown in real time that he's being erased. And Abraham's just standing there like a bouncer at the world's cruelest nightclub. Sorry, sir, your name's not on the list anymore. This whole family operates like a unit. Mom thinks daughter can do better. Dad's the silent enforcer, and Natalie's the one pulling strings from inside the house. This isn't a breakup. This is a coordinated operation. And my guy's still thinking, maybe it's hormones. Brother, hormones don't make your whole family run a psychological warfare campaign. I found out through my cousin Mila 2 months later. She worked at the county clerk's office and happened to see the birth certificate when it was filed. My daughter was born on March 3rd. Under father's name, it said Kieran Walsh, not me. Some guy named Kieran Walsh who Natalie had apparently met at a bar 3 weeks before she moved out. Let me be really clear about what that means. I was at every appointment for 6 months. I held her hair when she had morning sickness. I assembled the crib in the apartment we shared, and she put another man's name on our daughter's birth certificate. When Mila told me, I was sitting in my car in a parking lot outside a hardware store. I remember looking at my phone screen, reading the text she sent with a picture of the document, and I just smiled. Not because anything was funny, because I understood. This was who Natalie actually was. This was who her family actually was. And I finally knew exactly where I stood. I texted back, thanks for telling me. Then I sat there for maybe 20 minutes, just thinking. Not crying, not yelling, just thinking about what came next. See, this is the moment that separates people. Most people would have driven to that house immediately, would have made a scene, would have done something that gets used against them in court later. But this man sat in a hardware store parking lot, smiled, and started thinking. And not thinking like, how do I process this emotionally? Thinking like, okay, new information, recalculating route. That smile wasn't happiness. That was the sound of the old version of him dying and something much more dangerous being born. Some people break when they hit rock bottom. Other people find out what they're actually made of. Natalie met a guy at a bar 3 weeks before moving out. 3 weeks. Which means she was already shopping for his replacement while he was still assembling baby furniture. The audacity to have him build the crib for the baby she was planning to give to another man, that's not just betrayal, that's performance art. The first thing I did was call a family lawyer on Monday. His name was Oscar, recommended by a coworker. Oscar told me I had rights if the child was biologically mine, but establishing paternity would be a process. He also told me that Natalie had basically committed fraud by listing someone else as the father when she knew it wasn't true. I asked him what my options were and he gave me a list. I wrote everything down. Here's what most people don't understand about me. I don't react immediately when someone hurts me. I plan. I've always been like this. When I was a kid and my older brother broke my stuff, I didn't cry or hit him. I waited until I could get him back in a way that actually mattered. That's how I operate, so for the past 3 years, I've been building. I got promoted twice, I bought a house, I documented everything from the pregnancy, every receipt, every text message, every photo. I kept records of every payment I made while we were together. I tracked Natalie and Kieran through social media using a burner account. I know where they live, where they work, where their families are. I know that Kieran's parents think my daughter is biologically his. I know that Natalie told everyone I abandoned her during the pregnancy. Why did she do it? Best I can figure, Kieran had family money. His parents owned 3 car dealerships. Natalie grew up poor, her parents always struggling. Janice especially resented anyone who reminded her of that life. I was a reminder. I was savings accounts and budgets and 5-year plans. Kieran was immediate comfort and his family's money. Last week, Natalie's number showed up on my phone. After 3 years of nothing, she called me. I didn't answer. She called again. Then she sent a text that said, "We need to talk about Lily." Lily. That's my daughter's name. I've never held her. I've never heard her voice. I've seen exactly 4 photos of her that Natalie posted publicly before she made her accounts private. I've been waiting for this moment. Not hoping for it, not wishing for it, waiting. Because I knew eventually something would happen that would make her need me again. I just didn't know what it would be. I still haven't responded to her message, but I pulled out the folder I've been keeping. 3 years of preparation. 3 years of building a life specifically designed to destroy hers when the time came. Some of you might think revenge is unhealthy or that I should just move on. And maybe you're right. But I've spent 3 years watching this woman raise my daughter with another man while telling everyone I was a deadbeat who ran away. She took my child, and she took my reputation. Moving on was never an option. Part 2 coming once I decide how to play this first conversation. 3 years. This man spent 3 years leveling up in silence. Got promoted twice, bought a house, documented everything. While Natalie was living her little fairy tale with dealership money, thinking she got away clean, this man was building a case file like he works for the FBI. And here's what gets me. Janice rejected him because he represented that life, the life of budgets and savings and 5-year plans. You know what that life is called? Stability, responsibility. But no, Janice wanted her daughter to marry up, not marry smart. And look what that got her. A daughter who committed fraud for access to car dealership money. The apple didn't fall far from the tree. It fell directly into the tree's scheme. And now, 3 years later, Natalie needs something. And she's about to find out that the budget guy she threw away spent those 3 years becoming her worst nightmare. You wanted someone with money, Natalie? Well, now you're about to meet someone with something much more dangerous. Patience and receipts. Update 1. All right, you guys asked for an update, and honestly, I need to talk through what happened because my head is still spinning from this conversation. So after reading all your comments, I decided to respond to Natalie's text. Not immediately, though. I waited 2 full days. Let her sit with the silence the same way I sat with it for 3 years. Then, I sent one line. I'm available to talk Thursday at 6 p.m. My terms. She agreed within minutes. That alone told me something was wrong on her end, because the Natalie I knew would have argued about the time, the place, everything. She always had to control situations. I chose a diner near my office. Public place, cameras everywhere, and I knew the staff because I eat there regularly. I got there 20 minutes early, sat in a booth facing the door and waited. She walked in at exactly 6 p.m. and I barely recognized her. Not in some dramatic way, she just looked tired, worn down. She slid into the booth across from me and immediately started talking. She said she knew I probably hated her and she understood why, but things had gotten complicated and she needed to discuss Lily's future. I let her talk. That was my strategy. Let her explain herself. Let her think I was considering whatever she wanted. Gather information. The story came out in pieces. Kieran's parents, the ones with the car dealerships, had been supporting them financially for 3 years, paying their rent, covering daycare, giving Kieran a management position at one of the dealerships even though apparently he was terrible at it. But 6 months ago, his dad had a health scare and started looking more closely at the family finances. Started asking questions about Lily. Started wondering why she didn't look anything like Kieran. I just sat there listening. Natalie said Kieran's mom had been pushing for a family DNA test. Not because she suspected anything specific, just because she wanted to do one of those ancestry kits as a family activity. Kieran had been making excuses for months, but his mom kept bringing it up. And now his dad was getting suspicious too. So let me get this straight, I said. You're here because you're worried Kieran's family is going to find out Lily isn't his. And when that happens, the money stops. She tried to deny it. Tried to make it about Lily needing stability, about wanting to do the right thing, about how complicated everything had become. But I kept pushing. I asked her directly, did Kieran know from the beginning that Lily was mine? And this is where it got interesting. She said yes. She admitted that she told Kieran before Lily was even born that I was the biological father. He knew the whole time. They both decided to put his name on the birth certificate because his parents would never accept a grandchild that wasn't biologically theirs. They planned this together. 3 years. This man has been playing dad to my daughter for 3 years, knowing full well she was mine. And Natalie sat across from me acting like this was just some unfortunate situation that happened to her. I asked her what exactly she wanted from me. She said she wanted us to come to an agreement before things got messy. She wanted me to sign away my parental rights. In exchange, she would give me updates about Lily, pictures, maybe even occasional visits when Lily was older. She actually thought I would agree to this. After everything, I told her I needed time to think about it. She seemed relieved, like she thought she was getting through to me. She even reached across the table and touched my hand and said she knew I was a good person and that she was sorry things happened the way they did. But this was best for everyone. I pulled my hand back and told her I would be in touch. I need everyone to understand the audacity of this proposal. Sign away your parental rights to your own biological daughter. In exchange for pictures. Not custody, not a relationship. Pictures. Like she's offering him a premium Spotify subscription to his own child. For just your complete legal surrender, you'll get occasional photo updates and maybe, when Lily's older, you can wave at her from across a parking lot. And she touched his hand at the end. Oh, that's rich. That's the move. That's the, I'm going to manipulate you with intimacy because it worked before play. Except she's trying it on a man who spent 3 years preparing for this exact conversation. She's bringing a butter knife to a sword fight and wondering why she's losing. Here's what she doesn't know. The same week she texted me, I had already contacted Oscar again and updated him on everything. I filed a petition to establish paternity 3 days ago. The court will order a DNA test, and once that confirms what we both already know, I will have legal standing to challenge the birth certificate, establish custody rights, and completely destroy the little arrangement she and Kieran set up. But that's not all. Remember my cousin Mila, who works at the county clerk's office? She's friends with someone who works at the same dealership where Kieran supposedly manages things. According to her, Kieran's dad has already been talking about restructuring the family business, cutting out anyone who isn't pulling their weight. If Kieran loses his position and his parents find out Lily isn't really their granddaughter, he loses everything. No job, no family money. Probably no Natalie either once she realizes he can't provide for her anymore. Some of you are probably thinking I should just focus on getting custody of Lily and forget about revenge. And I hear you. But you need to understand something. These people didn't just take my daughter. They built an entire life on the lie that I didn't exist. Natalie's parents, Janice and Abraham, they told everyone I abandoned her. I've had mutual acquaintances ask me how I could walk away from my pregnant fiancé. My own reputation has been destroyed in circles I used to be part of. This isn't just about Lily. This is about making sure everyone who participated in this lie faces consequences. The paternity petition will be processed within the next few weeks. Natalie doesn't know about it yet. She thinks we're still negotiating. She texted me yesterday asking if I had made a decision about her proposal. I told her I was still considering my options. What she doesn't realize is that I've already made my decision. I made it 3 years ago when I sat in that parking lot looking at my daughter's birth certificate with another man's name on it. Next update, when the DNA results come back. Things are about to get very real for everyone involved. He filed the paternity petition before the diner meeting. She walked into that conversation thinking she was negotiating. She wasn't negotiating. She was confessing. Every word she said, every admission about Kieran knowing the whole time, every detail about the scheme. She handed him ammunition while thinking she was making a deal. That's why he let her talk. That's why he didn't interrupt. He wasn't considering her proposal, he was taking notes for the prosecution. And the reputation piece. People need to understand how deep that cuts. For 3 years, people in his life asked him how he could abandon his pregnant fiancée. He had to stand there and take accusations for something he didn't do because he couldn't prove he didn't do it. Every social gathering, every mutual friend, every family event. He was the villain in a story someone else wrote. This isn't just about custody. This is about rewriting the narrative. And honestly, some lies are so big that just moving on isn't justice. Sometimes people need to be held accountable. Not because revenge feels good, but because letting them get away with it means they never stop. Update 2. So the paternity petition was served to Natalie last Wednesday. I wasn't there to see it happen, but I can imagine her face when the process server showed up at her apartment. She texted me 17 times in 2 hours. Started with confusion, then moved to anger, then straight to threats. She said I was ruining everything. She said I had agreed to think about her proposal and this was a betrayal. She said Lily didn't need this chaos in her life and I was being selfish. The last message said she was going to fight this with everything she had. I didn't respond to any of them. But here's where things got complicated in a way I didn't anticipate. Kieran showed up at my job on Friday. I was walking to my car in the parking garage after work and there he was, leaning against a black Audi that definitely belonged to Daddy's dealership. First time I'd ever seen him in person. Tall guy, decent looking I guess, wearing clothes that probably cost more than my monthly car payment. He started talking immediately. Said he wanted to handle this man to man before lawyers got more involved. Said he understood I was angry, but I needed to think about what was best for Lily. Said he had been her father for 3 years, and that bond meant something even if biology said otherwise. I let him finish. Then I asked him one question. Did it ever bother you that you were raising another man's child while that man had no idea his daughter even existed? He actually tried to justify it. Said Natalie told him I was abusive, that I had anger issues, that she was scared to tell me about the pregnancy. Said he was protecting Lily by stepping up when I supposedly couldn't be trusted. Natalie told him I was abusive. She fabricated an entire history of violence to convince this guy that stealing my daughter was actually a rescue mission. And he believed it. Or at least he chose to believe it because it made him feel like a hero instead of a fraud. I told him that was interesting because I had 4 years of text messages, photos, and videos that showed zero evidence of any abuse. I told him I also had receipts for every prenatal appointment I drove Natalie to, every piece of baby furniture I bought, every payment I made while she was pregnant. I asked him if an abusive man would do all that and then just quietly disappear. He didn't have an answer for that. He just kept saying that Lily knew him as her father, and ripping that away would traumatize her. He said I should think about what I really wanted here. I told him what I wanted was my daughter, and then I got in my car and left him standing in that parking garage. Kieran really rolled up to a parking garage in Daddy's Audi, wearing his little expensive outfit, thinking he was about to intimidate someone. This man has been driving a borrowed car, working a job his dad gave him, raising a kid that isn't his, funded entirely by family money he didn't earn. And he shows up talking about handling things, man to man. With what? What exactly do you bring to this conversation besides audacity and a lease? And the audacity to say he was protecting Lily from an abusive father. That's not just a lie, that's a whole character assassination campaign. Natalie didn't just steal this man's daughter, she preemptively destroyed his reputation with the replacement dad, so he'd never question the arrangement. She built a false narrative as insurance. And Kieran chose to believe it because it made him feel righteous instead of complicit. Nobody wants to admit they're the bad guy, so they find a story that makes them the hero. I'm not stealing a child. I'm rescuing her. Sure, buddy. That's why you drove over here in your daddy's car to beg the real father to go away. But Kieran wasn't the only one who decided to get involved. 2 days later, Janice showed up at my house. Natalie's mother. The woman who blocked the door when I came to see my pregnant fiancée. The woman whose husband told me my child wasn't my concern. She was standing on my porch when I got home from grocery shopping. I almost didn't recognize her at first because she looked different than I remembered. Older, smaller somehow. She started talking before I even got to the door. She said she knew I was hurt and she understood why. She said she was sorry for how things happened, but I needed to understand that she was just trying to protect her daughter. She said Natalie had been scared and confused and made some bad decisions, but that didn't mean Lily should suffer. I asked her when exactly she started caring about what was best for Lily because from where I stood, she helped hide my daughter from me for 3 years. She got defensive fast. Said I was being unreasonable. Said I was letting anger cloud my judgment. Said Natalie had told her that I was difficult and controlling during the relationship. Same narrative, different messenger. Apparently Natalie had been telling everyone a version of events where I was the villain. I told Janice I had no interest in discussing this with her and asked her to leave my property. She kept trying to talk, kept trying to find some angle that would make me back down. Finally, she said something that made everything click into place. She said this was going to destroy Natalie's relationship with Kieran's family. She said Kieran's mother had already called her asking questions about Lily's real father. She said if I went through with this, Natalie would lose everything. And there it was. Janice didn't care about Lily. She didn't care about what was right. She cared about Natalie's access to Kieran's family money. She saw her daughter's meal ticket slipping away, and she was doing damage control. I told her that sounded like a problem for Natalie to figure out. Then I went inside and closed the door. Janice is the architect of all of this. She's been running the long game since day one. Natalie Can Do Better was never about love or compatibility. It was about money. She raised her daughter to see relationships as transactions, to view men as providers to be upgraded when a better offer comes along. And now, when the scheme is falling apart, she shows up at this man's door pretending to care about what's best for Lily. She doesn't care about that child. She cares that Natalie is about to lose access to dealership money. She cares that 3 years of scheming is about to blow up. She literally said the quiet part out loud. Natalie will lose everything. Not Lily will suffer. Not this will hurt the family. Natalie will lose everything. The money. That's all this has ever been about, and she had the nerve to call him unreasonable. The man whose child was stolen. The man whose reputation was destroyed. The man who was told his own daughter wasn't his concern. But sure, he's the unreasonable one. Janice should have stayed on her porch that day. Instead, she's standing on his, begging for mercy she never showed him. The court date for the DNA test was set for this past Monday. Natalie, Kieran, Lily, and I all had to appear. Oscar handled everything on my end. Natalie showed up with a lawyer too, some guy in an expensive suit who kept whispering to her during the proceedings. The judge ordered the DNA test without any complications. Standard procedure for paternity establishment. What wasn't standard was Kieran's behavior during the hearing. He kept interrupting his own lawyer, kept trying to make statements about his role as Lily's father, kept insisting the court consider the emotional impact on the child. The judge finally told him to be quiet or leave. I saw Lily for the first time in person at that hearing. 3 years old, with dark hair like mine and the same nose. She was holding Natalie's hand and looking around the courtroom with wide eyes. She had no idea who I was. That was the hardest part, not the legal stuff, not the confrontations. Seeing my daughter look right through me like I was a stranger, because to her, I was. The DNA results will be back within 2 weeks. Once paternity is established, Oscar says we move immediately to amend the birth certificate and file for custody. Natalie knows this is coming, and she's scrambling. Her lawyer is already talking about limiting my custody based on the fact that Lily has no relationship with me, as if that's my fault, and not the direct result of their fraud. But here's what none of them know yet. I've been in contact with Kieran's father, not directly, but through a mutual connection at my job. One of my coworkers bought a car from his dealership last year and still has the sales manager's contact info. I had him pass along a message expressing concern about some discrepancies in the family business management. Nothing specific, just enough to make Kieran's dad look a little closer at his son's work. If Kieran loses his parents' trust and gets exposed as a fraud who knowingly claimed another man's child, his whole life collapses, and Natalie goes down with him. Some of you might think I'm going too far, but I've spent 3 years being called a deadbeat by people who believed Natalie's lies. I've spent 3 years knowing my daughter was out there being raised by a man who knew she wasn't his. I've spent 3 years planning for exactly this moment. The DNA results come back next week. Then the real consequences begin. Lily has no relationship with me, as if that's my fault. That line right there. That's the whole case. They're literally using the consequences of their own fraud as a defense against him. Your Honor, he doesn't know his daughter because we made sure he couldn't. So clearly he shouldn't get custody. The absolute audacity of weaponizing the problem they created. And Kieran interrupting his own lawyer, making statements to the judge. That man is panicking. He can feel everything slipping away. 3 years of playing house with someone else's child. 3 years of pretending to be something he's not. And now reality is catching up at the speed of a court order. And seeing Lily for the first time? Imagine being in that courtroom. Your biological daughter is 10 feet away from you. She has your features, your DNA, your blood. And she looks at you like you're nobody. That moment would break most people, but this man already did his breaking 3 years ago in that parking lot. Now he's just collecting what's his. Final update. DNA results came back Monday. 99.98%. Probability that I am Lily's biological father. Not that anyone was surprised, but seeing it on paper after 3 years of knowing the truth without being able to prove it was something else entirely. Oscar filed the motion to amend the birth certificate the same day. The court granted it within 48 hours because the evidence was overwhelming. Kieran's name is being removed. Mine is going on. Officially, legally, permanently. But here's where everything started falling apart for them faster than even I anticipated. Kieran's father apparently didn't need my coworker's message to start asking questions. The man built a business empire by noticing when things didn't add up, and his son's behavior over the past month had raised enough red flags. According to Mila's dealership contact, Kieran's dad showed up at the dealership last Thursday and demanded a private meeting with Kieran in his office. Nobody knows exactly what was said, but Kieran walked out looking like he'd been hit by a truck, cleared out his desk the same afternoon. The next morning, Natalie texted me again. Different tone this time. No threats, no manipulation, just desperation. She said Kieran's parents had cut them off completely. No more rent payments, no more daycare money, no more anything. She said Kieran was talking about moving back to his parents' house alone to try to fix things with them. She said she was about to be a single mother with no income and no support. I read that message 3 times. 3 years ago, she made me feel exactly what she was feeling now. She took my child and my future and handed them to someone else because he came from money. And now that money was gone and suddenly she remembered I existed. I responded with one line. You made your choices. Kieran was talking about moving back to his parents' house alone. Alone. When the money dried up, suddenly the family man decided being a family man wasn't worth it anymore. 3 years of playing dad, and the moment it costs him something, he's out. That's who Natalie left this man for. That's the upgrade Janice was so proud of. A guy who bails the second things get hard. Meanwhile, the budget guy she rejected, still here, still fighting, still showing up. Natalie bet her entire future on a man whose commitment was funded by his parents' checkbook. The second that checkbook closed, so did his dedication. And now she's texting her ex about how she's going to be a single mother with no support. To the man whose child she stole, whose reputation she destroyed, whose daughter she gave to someone else. The lack of self-awareness is genuinely impressive. You made your choices. 4 words. 3 years of buildup. That response was perfect. The custody hearing was scheduled for this past Friday. Oscar had prepared everything meticulously. We had all my documentation from the pregnancy, proof that I was present and supportive until Natalie deliberately cut me out. We had her admission from the diner conversation that she and Kieran knowingly committed paternity fraud. We had evidence that Kieran's family had been supporting them financially based on the belief that Lily was biologically his. Natalie showed up with her lawyer but without Kieran. Apparently, he had decided that fighting for a child who wasn't biologically his wasn't worth the legal fees now that his parents' money wasn't available. Natalie looked worse than the last time I saw her. She kept glancing at the door like she expected Kieran to walk in and save her. Her lawyer tried to argue that I had abandoned Natalie during the pregnancy, that I had shown no interest in Lily for 3 years, that disrupting the child's established routine would be harmful. Oscar shut all of it down. He presented the timeline showing that Natalie stopped responding to my messages, that her father told me the baby wasn't my concern, that I was actively blocked from contacting her. He showed the court that I began legal action to establish paternity within days of being contacted by Natalie again. The judge asked Natalie directly why she had listed Kieran as the father when she knew I was the biological parent. She tried to deflect, said she was scared and confused, said she thought it was best for the baby. The judge asked her if she understood that this constituted fraud. Her lawyer jumped in and tried to redirect, but the damage was done. I was awarded joint custody. Standard visitation schedule to start, with the possibility of expanding as Lily adjusts to having me in her life. The judge also ordered that the paternity fraud be referred to the district attorney's office for potential prosecution. That part wasn't my doing. It was the judge's decision based on the evidence presented. After the hearing, I walked out of the courthouse and Natalie followed me to the parking lot. She was crying, asking me how I could do this to her, saying I was destroying her life. I stopped and turned around. I told her that 3 years ago I stood on her mother's porch and begged to see my pregnant fiancé. I told her I spent 3 years being called a deadbeat by people who believed her lies. I told her I watched my daughter grow up in photos posted by a man who knew he wasn't her father. I told her she didn't get to act like the victim now that her scheme fell apart. She kept trying to explain herself, said she was young and scared, said Kieran promised her security, said her parents pressured her into making that choice. I told her I didn't care about her reasons anymore. I told her the only thing I cared about now was Lily. She kept glancing at the door, like she expected Kieran to walk in and save her. That's the moment right there. She's still waiting for a man to rescue her. First, it was Kieran with his family money. Now she's standing in court looking for him to show up like a hero in a movie. But there is no hero coming. The guy she picked ran the moment it got expensive. And here's what kills me about the young and scared defense. She was 26. She made a conscious decision to put another man's name on that birth certificate. She spent 3 years telling everyone her ex was a deadbeat. She was 26 every single day she chose to maintain that lie. Young and scared is for teenagers who don't know better, not grown adults, who orchestrate multi-year fraud schemes with their entire family's participation. And Natalie standing there asking, "How could you do this to me?" That's the mentality that got her here. Even now, she sees herself as the victim of circumstances rather than the architect of her own destruction. Abraham and Janice were waiting by Natalie's car when we got to the parking lot. Janice started walking toward me immediately, already talking about how this wasn't fair, how I was being cruel, how I needed to consider Natalie's feelings. Abraham just stood there looking at the ground. I told Janice that I remembered exactly what Abraham said to me on their porch 3 years ago. I told her I remembered every single time she made me feel like I wasn't good enough for her daughter. I told her that her daughter was facing potential criminal charges for fraud, and that maybe instead of lecturing me, she should be finding her a better lawyer. Then I got in my car and drove away. That was 3 days ago. Since then, Natalie has texted me 14 times trying to negotiate. She wants to avoid the fraud charges. She wants to work out an arrangement where I don't push for more custody. She keeps offering things she can't actually deliver, like money she doesn't have or access to Lily, on days that aren't legally mine. I haven't responded to any of it. Oscar is handling all communication through official channels now. Lily starts her first overnight visit with me this coming weekend. I've set up a bedroom for her with everything a 3-year-old needs. I've been reading books about how to help children adjust to shared custody situations. I've prepared myself for the fact that she might be scared or confused or angry. Some of you asked in the comments if getting revenge felt as good as I thought it would. Honestly, I don't know how to answer that. Watching Natalie's life collapse, watching Kieran lose everything, watching Janice realize she couldn't manipulate her way out of this, all of that felt justified. It felt like 3 years of patience finally paying off. But the thing I keep thinking about isn't the revenge. It's the fact that I'm going to meet my daughter for real this weekend. Not in a courtroom, not through photographs. Actually spend time with her. Get to know her. Start building the relationship I should have had from the beginning. When I saw her name on that birth certificate 3 years ago with Kieran listed as her father, I smiled and said okay, because I knew this moment would come eventually. I didn't know when or how, but I knew I would get here. Now I'm here, and it's time to be a father.